Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're having a little chat about scary movies because of course that is what you do at Halloween and it's what I do the whole year round. But today we're focusing on 9 films in particular that I have chosen to talk about and suggest that you watch these if you haven't already. And if you have, you can enjoy me talking about films that you've already seen, but let's get into it. First off, we have got the one and only Scream. This may be my favourite horror film of all time, and yes, it is the first one that I'm talking about. I just couldn't be asked to reorder these films, but it is a cult classic, and if you were born in the 90s or a little bit before, this is probably well known to you and you've probably seen it multiple times, or you've watched it the one time, hated it, and then never went back. Scream was released in 1997 and basically it carried the love for slasher films into the 90s. And this first film was so successful that it created a whole franchise of films which are still being made to this day, and the 7th one is being released in 2026. The film itself was the highest grossing slasher film in the world until the release of the direct Halloween sequel in 2018. The film is set in the fictional town of Woodsboro, California, where a series of murders start to occur, and the mask used during these murders adopts the name of Ghostface. If you haven't seen any of the Scream films, you are bound to have seen the Ghostface mask. As the film goes on, more secrets are revealed, which gives us a hint into why the murders are happening in the first place and sets us up for the grand finale. We get to know many lovable characters on the way and find ourselves rooting for them and their fates. The reason I love Scream so much, and the reason it's my favourite scary film, is because not only did it start this really successful franchise and world, it's just the perfect combination of a teen drama, 90s style, and a bit of mystery. The soundtrack itself is also so reminiscent of the era in which it was released in, and so it showcases indie rock songs which capture so well that teen environment. Though this film doesn't scare me, it's still a great Halloween pick because it has that mystery and just enough gore that doesn't make you feel sick. I am the last person to watch a gory torture film, so none of these films listed are going to include anything of that nature. Next up is Sleepy Hollow. I would classify this film as a historical / gothic horror that is probably one of Tim Burton's best works. This is probably not a popular opinion at all, but I believe this film is one of his best due to its quirkiness and the artistic nature. Sleepy Hollow tells the story of the Headless Horseman, a mythical being that appeared in folklore in medieval Europe. Depending on the legend, the Headless Horseman is either carrying his head or missing his head altogether and maybe searching for it. The film is loosely based on Washington Irving's short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and depicts a police constable, Ichabod Crane, who is sent from New York to investigate a series of murders in the village of Sleepy Hollow. Ichabod, being from an urban city, has no interest in the paranormal or folklore and is adamant from his arrival in Sleepy Hollow that these murders are at the hands of a human, flesh and blood killer. But of course, as the film goes on, it seems to be that more supernatural occurrences are at play. I absolutely love how Tim created pieces of early modern tech such as Ichabod's glasses that he wears when he's examining bodies, just to play into this whole gothic kind of vibe. And I absolutely love the use of colour in this film to exemplify the starkness of the blood. For example, in the church scene, I won't go into detail, you've got the really bright red blood in the church, and then outside it's just stark greys and blacks. If you're in the mood for something a little bit different this Halloween, something that is more folklorish but still a horror, I would absolutely suggest watching this. The Conjuring. I remember the first time I watched this and thinking about how this is the perfect supernatural horror film. James Wan did a fantastic job combining the 70s groovy feel with that isolated suburban farmhouse atmosphere. The Conjuring tells the story of the Perron family and their move into an old rundown farmhouse in Rhode Island. Soon after moving in, creepy events start to take place, which then escalate more and more until the mother Carolyn contacts the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine Warren were of course very well known paranormal investigators during this time, who were involved in multiple alleged paranormal sightings and occurrences. The film then centres itself in these hauntings in what would then be known as the Conjuring house as they intensify and worsen. I absolutely love that 1 doesn't heavily rely on special effects, but rather makeup and darkness to make the experiences look horrifically real and feel so tense. This was supported by creepy items such as the music box, which April, one of the daughters, grows so fondly attached to. I also really enjoyed the soundtrack to this film, not only because there is a Dead Man's Bones song in, but it managed to make a song released in the 70s develop a sense of dread, and this added to the whole suspense and horror of the film. If you're looking for a film that will install an instant sense of fear and dread to the point that you're looking over your shoulder for the next couple of days, this is the perfect film. Whilst I'm on the subject, the second Conjuring film is just as good as the first, and I thought it deserved a shout out. The Conjuring films have done so well, in fact, that there are now 3 which are part of this Conjuring universe, and a 4th one will be released next year. Another incredible film by James Wan is Insidious. While this is a lot more fantastical than the Conjuring film, you can still tell that it is him that directed this. Insidious, along with The Conjuring, is composed by Joseph Bishara. I don't really know how to explain the sound of these soundtracks. You just need to listen to them. Well, watch the films and then listen to them. But it just fills you with instant dread, instant horror, like there is someone that's going to jump out on you. That's the only way I can describe it, really. The film follows the Lambert family, who move into a new house in what looks like a normal middle-class suburban neighbourhood. Soon after, the mother, Renee, experiences a few little occurrences which puts herself and us as the audience on edge. Then, not before long, one of their sons unfortunately slips into a coma, and suddenly a lot more supernatural phenomena is happening in the house. The film then follows the Lambert family down an otherworldly kind of path, which you do not expect when you first start watching the film. I don't want to say too much about this film, but it is a very creative plot which plays upon the notion of astral projection. At the same time, it doesn't take away from the overall supernatural creepy feeling of the film, and there were still many jump scares in there which were absolutely terrifying the first time I watched it. One of my favourite scenes of the film is when they call a lady called Denise and her team in to investigate what may be occurring in their home. And there is a scene where she is, with the help of her team, drawing something she can see in the corner of the room, and we obviously can't see what it is because it's too dark, but the way that it's shot and the way that it's scripted makes it so terrifying. The film itself did so well that it has its own franchise like The Conjuring, and the 5th film, which I did recently watch, is actually directed by Patrick Wilson, who played the father in films 1, 2 and 5. I did watch the 3rd film, but it was not great, and it in fact put me off watching the 4th one. Both of these were not directed by James Wan. It lost that Insidious feel, I think. But Insidious is still one of my favourite horror films, and I love it for being so creative and so different to other supernatural films that I've seen. Next up, we have another cult classic. If you were born in the 90s, you will know this film quite well. Final Destination brings upon us this feeling of relentless evil. I appreciate a solid plot in any film, although I do have some guilty pleasures, but this film has just that. Final Destination follows a student called Alex who is boarding a plane to France on a school trip, when all of a sudden he has a premonition that the plane is going to explode. After Alex begs to be allowed off the plane, a few students and his teacher come with him. Lo and behold, the plane does explode, and Alex is being treated as a suspect because he knew that it was going to happen. The film then follows this group that walked off the plane, and we find out that you cannot cheat death. As I said before, I'm not a big fan of gore. Hey, that rhymes. As I said before, I'm not a big fan of gore, and I would say that this film has just about enough gore that I can deal with. It also makes me wonder why Death wants to kill people in such gruesome ways. I guess Death is pissed that they didn't die when they were meant to die? Anyway, it is such a clever plot because it makes you paranoid the entire film through, because you are essentially waiting for someone to die in a very gruesome way. It is what makes Final Destination so difficult to watch, but at the same time, this is what keeps you fixated on it. It's one of those films where you cannot physically look away from the screen even though you really want to, and you're holding a cushion across your face just in case. There are currently 5 Final Destination films, and I believe I've seen the first 4. And I think the reason it's so successful and why people keep going to see them is because somehow, I don't know how, but somehow with every new Final Destination film, the deaths become more and more elaborate and gruesome. There is a scene involving a balance bar, which I believe is in the fourth film, and if you know what I'm talking about, you know, and it haunts me. There is actually a meme about lorries carrying logs along the motorway, and the caption reads, "How one movie damaged an entire generation," and it's just so relatable. It Follows. Can we just take a moment to appreciate this film for the greatness that it is? It's one of those films where by the end of the film you realise you've watched something extraordinary. I'd say the reason this film scared me so much is because I had no prior knowledge of what it was about, and I think my system was shocked. I hands down am confident in saying this is one of the best horror films I've ever seen. It boasts a fantastically written plot which is both captivating and suspenseful. The film follows the events surrounding 19-year-old Jay, who is your normal teenage girl who goes to school and has a group of friends. Everything is seemingly normal until, after hooking up with the guy she's seeing, she starts experiencing some strange, creepy visions. Similar to Final Destination, this film holds a feeling of impending doom, which slowly builds during the whole runtime. It's a slow, torturous kind of tension that is backed up by the unsettling retro soundtrack. You come to learn that Jay's visions are 100% real, and each scene is incredibly shot to make you look at every person that is walking, as they may just be the thing following her. People have argued that this film is representative or symbolic of STDs, because Jay is plagued by these visions after having sexual intercourse, just as you'd catch an STI after having sexual intercourse. Out of all these films, this is probably the one I would recommend you watch the most. It is so different to other horror films that I've watched in so many ways, but it does make sure to give you that adrenaline rush that you'd rightly expect from a horror film. After the film's release, it gained a cult following, which is not surprising at all, and it has a sequel in the works which is currently at the pre-production stage. It too, along with the first film, will be directed by David Robert Mitchell, and it will be called They Follow. That is terrifying. This may be the only film released in the 80s on this list. Directed by the one and only John Carpenter, The Thing was released in 1982. It is classed as a sci-fi horror film, which makes sense, and is an adaptation of the novella The Thing from Another World. When I tell you this film is worth a watch, what I really mean is this is one of the best horror films in the world, if not one of the best films in the world. And this is why. The Thing tells the story of a group of American researchers in Antarctica who encounter the Thing, an extraterrestrial life form that assimilates, then imitates other organisms. Just reading that plot, knowing what it looks like in the film, it makes me feel... The film opens with a husky running through the snow in Antarctica while being followed by a helicopter. And you may think, why is a dog being followed by a helicopter? We are then introduced to the team of researchers and get to know their personalities and how isolated they all are whilst working there. The normal day-to-day working environment of the team suddenly goes to when a few of the animals start to act a little bit strangely, and then inevitably more and more of the team members. The team come to find that an organism is making its way through camp, and unsettlingly, it can take on the form of its victims. From the Thing's point of view, it is trying to assimilate as fast as it can, and it knows the best way to spread is by humans because we are intelligent and we like living in groups. Paranoia really becomes a focal point the more the film goes on, as the whole research team can no longer trust each other, because any one of them could have been assimilated or turned into the Thing. Critics are known to have both praised the special effects achievements and criticised their visual repulsiveness at the same time. Personally, for a film made in the 80s, the special effects were way before its time. And remember, in the 80s, special effects meant physically making something to look the way it looks in a film. Most of the creatures you see in this film, if not all, actually looked and moved in the way that you see them in the film. That, paired with the compelling storyline of this film, just makes it a no-brainer to watch. There is a prequel to The Thing, also called The Thing, but my partner is not letting me watch it. Well, I kind of do want to watch it, but apparently it's so I will give it a go eventually, but I'm not expecting great things. On to a beautiful gem of a movie next. A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place is a sci-fi horror film directed by John Krasinski, who we know as Jim from The Office, and starring John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, who are an absolute power couple. The film is set in a world where sightless aliens with sharp hearing and impenetrable armour have taken over the planet and killed most of the human population. It follows a family surviving in this world, and in order to survive, they have to use sign language to communicate with each other. The daughter is also deaf, so the sign language does serve two purposes here. Due to the fact that you have to be quiet in order to survive, the film is inevitably quiet almost the whole way through. This adds a level of tension that makes it uncomfortable to watch, and any sound that you do hear sounds excruciatingly loud. I always find myself trying to be as quiet as possible, including not breathing loudly, because I don't want to be killed by the creatures. The acting is tremendous in this film, like all the films that I've listed on this list, but Emily Blunt in particular, in the scene where she's giving birth in silence, is quite phenomenal, and she's just giving out tiny little noises to make us aware of how much pain she's truly in, and it makes you feel that pain yourself. The creatures themselves, known as death angels, are the stuff made of nightmares. They have exceedingly long arms that look like they'd pierce straight through you, and their faces are covered by layers of flesh that open up to reveal sharp, jagged teeth. The film won Critics' Choice Movie Award for Best Sci-Fi Horror Film and many, many others. A second film came out in 2020, also directed by John Krasinski, which I do believe is just as good, if not a teeny bit below the first film. I am aware of the third instalment and I haven't seen it just yet, but it is definitely on my list. The final film on this list, Jeepers Creepers. I was kind of hesitant to include this film due to stuff surrounding it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google the director and you will see what I mean. But the reason I wanted to share this film is because it is the first horror film I watched. And as a kid, I was obsessed with this film so much that I would get up in the morning before school, watch, say, half of the film, go to school, come back, and then watch the second half. And my mum, well, my whole family thought I was a little bit strange, and that's true. Anyway, this is the first horror film I watched, but it's also fantastically scary, which I will get into. It begins with a brother and sister driving back from their spring break holiday, and they're just chatting and passing the time. Then we get one of the greatest tension building scenes I've ever seen in a horror film. An old beaten up truck slowly comes into frame as it drives closer and closer to the car they're in. Then all hell breaks loose and the truck driver is beeping and trying to get in front of them, whilst at the same time not taking the opportunity to overtake when the brother tells him to go around their car. So after this crazy opening scene, the film gets even darker as the brother and sister realise that this person is stalking them. In fact, after this opening scene, you get what I believe is the scariest shot of the film. The brother and sister talk about what just happened to them and they try to forget about it and concentrate on getting home. And just a side note here, I love the fact that the roads used in this film are just isolated. They are in the middle of nowhere, and it really gives that sense of dread if something was happening to you that you just couldn't get help. Back to the shot I was referring to. As they're driving past what looks like an abandoned church, they spot the same old truck parked just outside. And this time the driver is now out of the truck and carrying questionable packages towards a pipe that leads down below the church. I cannot express how terrifying this was to me when I first saw it, because it is the perfect balance of not seeing too much but seeing just enough, and the fact that we can't see his face either just makes your imagination run wild because you are trying to think what he could look like. The film then delves even deeper into this mysterious figure and they continue to be followed, and obviously the police get involved, and like in all good horror films, they find it hard to believe their story. I absolutely love the orchestral soundtrack to this film because it suits the figure so well, and if you watch it you will know what I'm talking about. All I will say is that the prosthetics team did a phenomenal job in creating what they did. There are 4 Jeepers Creepers films altogether. I've seen the first 3 and I solemnly believe they do get worse and worse as they go on. The second film wasn't that bad, it was commendable, but the third film was questionable. If I'm being honest, when I was researching this, I had no idea there was a 4th film, and it's not even called Jeepers Creepers 4, it's called Jeepers Creepers Reborn, so I guess that was a ploy to try and get people to watch it again. And this was released in 2022, so I will pop this on my list to watch in the hopes that it brings back that scare factor and what I love so much about the first film. But please go and watch the first Jeepers Creepers film. It is a fantastic film to watch at Halloween and just a really well-made horror film. And that is my list of 9 films that I think you should watch this Halloween. Do let me know, of course, if you've seen any of these films and what you think. It's probably likely that you have seen a few of them if you're watching this video. And if there are some films that you think I should watch, obviously I've watched more horror films than the ones I've listed today, but if you genuinely feel there is something that I should watch this Halloween, please comment that below also. But until next time guys, take care.